heartbreaking to know that most of his works aren't played anymore. And that's one of the things. I didn't really expect to find all of this when I started any of this project. I was just interested in the one piece I was working on, and then I found this, and I found that, and then he's got around 13 operas, and then majority of his works are actually vocal work. It's not actually music for the double bass, but he is literally opera obsessed. And literally, when he's not doing opera, writing an opera, he'll be playing opera on the bass. That was just him. Yeah.
I'm so glad I got connected with today's guest. It was through Leon Bosch, and whenever Leon Bosch makes a recommendation, I sit up and listen. So thank you, Leon, for connecting us. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we're talking today with Stephen Street, who is quite the versatile bassist in the UK, playing jazz and classical music and getting into publishing. And that's why Leon connected us. Stephen has the goal of doing Urtext editions for all of Bottazzini's works. So we talk about that, but much more, of course, what the pandemic's been like. How can you not talk about that? Life for him, playing in various orchestras. We know a lot of people in common. That's just how it goes for me with the podcast these days. Definitely check out what he's doing. He's got an awesome website. You can check out his editions there. We've got some of his editions coming into our sheet music store as well, which is very cool. And you can follow him on all the socials. We got that all linked up in the show notes. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, and Modacity. More on them later. But let's get into this conversation with Stephen Street. Hey!
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. How's it going?
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Nice. Wow, I like your wall art. What is that extensive?
That is a jazz family tree.
Wow.
It is bloody brilliant.
How cool is that? Wow. I've never seen that before. I'm going to have to pick one of those up. That's great.
Yeah, it is absolutely brilliant. Literally starts right the way from blues all the way up to a lot of the current guys up the top. It's brilliant.
Wow. Well, it's great to meet you. Thanks to Leon for introducing us. We know a lot of the same people. It sounds like looking through what you're up to. Are you in London right now, or where are you at exactly?
I'm down in the south of the UK at the current minute.
Oh, okay.
I stayed in Londden for 6 years. That's all. That's how I got to meet Leon. He's one of my teachers.
Oh, do you happen to be in Bournemouth right
That's
now?
me.
Or are you okay? So another person we know in common, David Daly.
Yes, I have worked with David Daly in the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. So yes, I do know David.
Yeah, that's great. I have great memories of him. He and his wife came out to the West Coast maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we got together at one of these old cafes here in San Francisco.
Lovely.
And so
Yeah, he's a
small
great
world.
chap.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like a lovely part of the country too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly a good place to be during everything that's currently going on. Is you can go get some decent exercise in the nice surrounding area. It's worth it.
Nice.
Very lucky.
Yeah. Well, I at the moment I wish I was in a situation more like that, because I'm right in downtown San Francisco, and big cities are great normally, but it's a little bit of a disaster movie right here. And,
no, I completely understand, but it's everywhere, so you can't really avoid it. So.
Yeah. So I was in the UK almost exactly a year ago. I was filming a couple courses for Discover Double Bass up in Leeds.
All right.
And it was the cheapest plane ticket I've ever gotten in my life. And I thought, why is it so cheap? And then I thought, oh, Leeds in January or February. Maybe not
a tourist hotspot. No, perhaps not.
What's it like though? This time of year, is it the stereotypical kind of rainy weather, or what's it like?
It's not too bad. We're lucky. There's quite a big difference between the north and the south in the UK, and also being by the coast, we generally are slightly warmer because the water keeps the land warmer. So yeah, it's probably one of the nicer places to be. We have a little bit of a microclimate down here. We're very lucky.
Okay.
It's always
Wow.
gonna
Yeah,
rain.
I got to visit. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. That's okay. I felt like such a fool last year. I made that whole trip over to Leeds, and I thought, oh, when I get to the UK, I'm going to take a couple weeks and go to London and explore. Now I really wish I did that now, because we're all locked down.
You'll get a chance again. Don't worry.
I will. Yeah. So I'll get back and I'll make a proper trip of it and really explore.
You're very welcome.
So hopefully we can meet. Yeah, that'd be great. Wow. And so, and you also studied with Chris West, I believe, right?
Both of my teachers are utter legends, I have to say. They are brilliant. I'm so lucky to have had them.
That's great. That's great. Have you always been into? I'm assuming you're into jazz, since you've got this cool family tree. Have you always been into jazz as well?
Yes, very much so. I've always led a bit of a double life, if I'm honest. My first routing into music was through bass guitar, and I taught myself that. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I actually started double bass and got a scholarship a couple of years after that to start studying with Chris. But I've always wanted to be employable as possible, and I've always wanted to be a musician, so playing lots of different styles, not just just too much channeled in one way.
Wow. What? Tell me about what I've never asked one of Chris's students or one of Leon Bosch's students. Like, what are they like as teachers? Could you just describe their styles? I think that'd be interesting.
Yes. And
that's a big question. Sorry.
Yeah, you can tell by the look on my face. It is a big question. Different, but both brilliant in the sense that Chris knows exactly what buttons to press to sort of get you going, to go and send off your own sort of chain of thought. But Leon is just massively inspiring because Chris West is also, as you probably know, a very regarded mathematician as well as being a bass player. And so his approach is methodical and it's very, very well thought out. But Leon's incredibly passionate. Not that Chris is not passionate, but Leon's just this really inspiring, really getting you thinking from the sort of the heart, if you make any sense. They both complemented each other in that way. That's why I was so lucky to have either of them, because I had all the great foundations from Chris in terms of all the thumb position technique that I think everybody should learn, this thumb position technique. And then Leon just really fine-tuning me as a musician. And yeah, he's a great complement to each other.
Wow. Yeah, Chris West has some sort of San Francisco connection too. I think one of his in-laws or something like that is the conductor for the ballet. Maybe that's it. Yeah, it could be his brother. But yeah, we worked out. I got an introduction, and so I have some ballet tickets waiting for me.
Great.
Whenever the ballet starts up again, who knows when that'll be?
Yeah, Chris is one of those incredibly intelligent people. He just can do anything. It seems he's one of those people who just has that brain. It's, right, I'm just going to do that now.
Wow.
Okay.
So how long were you How long were you living in London?
So I lived there for 6 years. I did both an undergraduate and a master's at Trinity Laban, and they were the most supportive, welcoming, opening music college. And I actually did both the jazz course and the classical course side by side. I did effectively 2 degrees. Is
that common, or is that for bass players? Or
it's not common. But I just auditioned on both, and I was offered places on both courses. And I said to them, look, I absolutely love both. Please, can I try and do something of the both together? And so they tried to make something work together. I was predominantly in the classical department because there was more need for me there. But I did as much as I could of everything, basically. I was always pulled left, right, and centre for absolutely every project under the sun.
What's the London jazz? I'm just curious. What's the London jazz scene like? Because here in the States, people might have New York City is a hotbed for jazz for sure. There are only a few other spots that nothing's like New York City.
I understand.
In terms of this country at least. San Francisco, we've got a couple clubs. We've had this place Yoshi's for a long time that people will play at, but otherwise. You run out of venues pretty quick, but I'm just always curious, what's the scene like?
That's a very interesting question. It's kind of a big question. I argue that in the UK, there's a much closer focus towards composition and ensembles of your own, which you take to different places, rather than it being just in a particular venue. Yes, we have a few venues, and there's many great venues, but there's only, say, 4 or 5 which is purely just dedicated to jazz, unlike New York, where those are everywhere. Venues have to adapt in the UK to have different things on different nights a lot of the time. I'd say the UK jazz scene is incredibly vibrant. It's, in some ways, I'd say underappreciated by some of the people in this country. But it's a very hard-working one. I can definitely say that. There's lots of sort of pockets of it everywhere, if it makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
I've got many fond memories.
It's so interesting to me how different cities across the globe and just different scenes. I was in Melbourne, Australia, year and change ago, and talking to Ben Hanlon, who plays in the Melbourne Symphony, but also plays jazz, and he was just rattling off these jazz clubs, and I mean it was incredible.
I'd argue in the UK, the sort of Ronnie Scott's is the main hub of them all, which all the major artists come over to and they visit and they play at. But there's a few other brilliant venues like the Vortex, the 606, and there's Oliver's Jazz Bar in Greenwich, which is a great little underground bar which supports Trinity Laban. So there's lots of little places and we have jazz in some of the major venues as well. And that's what I mean by venues are adaptable. It's not necessarily always jazz at one place, but they adapt their program depending on what's going on, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've got some of those, too. It'll be like a country band one night, and here in San Francisco, it'll be like beat poetry one night, and then jazz a couple nights. I always had such a hard time balancing that orchestral 10 a.m. rehearsal life with like playing till 2 in the morning or something like that.
I had exactly the same problem, particularly trying to do 2 degrees. The idea was to go to the Ronnie Scott's jam as much as possible, because that's where one of the better jams happens, and that's going on till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I'd have symphony orchestra in the morning, like 10 a.m. start.
So Leon, you sent me I checked out your website, and you've got all sorts of editions, and you've got this great and gigantic goal of publishing text all of Bottazzini's work, that's something that I think someone who's had an association with Leon Bosch, that's like a goal that I think.
Yeah, I've got that same sort of mentality to him. Like, he runs all the marathons and what have you. It's just my sort of like, I must try and do it, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, when did that become an interest of yours?
That came through my studies, and basically through when I didn't have something that I needed, I'd just then create it myself. As with all of my projects anyway, I want everything I do to benefit others. That's the bottom line under all of everything that I'm trying to do. But one thing that really stimulated the urtext idea was Capriccio di Bravura. I'd be listening to different recordings, and I'd find one bit right down to the boots, and then hear another recording, way up in the sky. And you just left at the point where you think, what did he actually do? And so the idea and the ethos behind it is just to bring context to the current editions so that you can decide how you want to play it. There's obviously no problem how you play it, because it's just as long as you're getting what you want out of it. It's just to give a sort of context and a setting and understanding what actually happened, then you can decide from that. That's what it came from.
After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66, yes, that's a lot, video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble-bass.com/Jason Heath. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make an incredible mic for upright bass called the Nadine, and 6-time Grammy-winning jazz bassist and former Contrabass Conversations guest, Christian McBride, is a big fan. Christian says, as an acoustic bassist, it's very important for me to have this instrument amplified as naturally as possible. What I love about this microphone is that it makes the instrument sound exactly how I hear it in my head. Honestly, I don't know if you can get a better review than that. The Nadine is an instrument-mounted condenser mic with an incredibly clear, natural sound and great feedback rejection. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt with mic purchase from their website. Just visit www.eartrumpletlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and learn more about Nadine. Well, I imagine that Bottazzini's music would be particularly confusing because so many editions, they're written in the sounding octave versus that. I was talking recently, I haven't put it on the podcast yet, but Tobias Gluckler, who has done a lot of editions over the years of especially some Viennese bass repertoire. You know, he's done Dittersdorf and Von Hall. And I was asking him, like, how does one even approach an urtext? And for him, it's like this years and years process of chewing on these things. Like, how do you even start? I mean, maybe we could talk about Bottazzini since we're both bass players, but like how does one put together something in the kind of urtext?
Well, the lucky thing with Bottazzini is the fact that he was very meticulous with his manuscript. So he would keep a lot of his manuscripts bound in sort of travel catalogues, so he knew that they were his final editions. And there weren't separate bass parts, so he must have played from memory every time. And the other thing is he always wrote the pitch out at sounding pitch, because he was a genius, obviously, but he was often thinking from an orchestration point of view, in my opinion. So he'd be thinking that frequency needs to relate to that voicing in the piano, so that's where it needs to be. So in that way, some of the work is taken away from us because he's been so meticulous in the way he's kept his records that you just need to give a representation of that. It's only when people have changed it afterwards that it's become a bit of an issue, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. Yeah. So how does one? I'd be interested in, how do you approach something like that? Are you like looking just at the manuscript, or do you have another couple editions in front of you and you're kind of referring back and forth?
Well, yes.
How does that work?
That is the case, because when you're trying to learn a piece, you end up getting a few different editions. But it's through the fact that I've looked at several different editions and not found one the same everywhere, if that makes sense, that I had to then go and look at the manuscript, because the manuscript, we have to say, is the most important, if you like. It's a crude way to say it, but that's what it came from. So we have to give priority to what that is written. And if nobody's got access to that, then they can't make judgments, if that makes sense.
Is Bottazzini, if I remember right, he wrote somewhere around 300 works? I think that's what Leon emailed me. Okay, and there are manuscripts. How accessible are these manuscripts? Are there like scans available of them online, or do you have to like contact a library?
It's a real mixture, because there's a few scores dotted around the world, and there's also different copyright laws on different things. So the scores that I've been studying, a few from America, and the editions I've been working on so far have been in America. Italy has different moral and ownership copyrights on things. Yeah. So it's all very dictatorial on where the manuscript is kept. Yes, some websites do have scans available, or they can just hand it straight out. Some you actually have to go there yourself and take your photos or look at the manuscript yourself. Wow.
But are you typically allowed, we don't have to get specific, but are you typically allowed to take photographs if you make arrangements like that, and then you can take them home and do an edition?
Because it's in the interest of freedom of information or what have you, but yes, usually.
Wow, you're like a musical Indiana Jones.
I'm trying my best.
That's interesting. So you've done the Bottazzini method so far?
I can show you a copy. Yeah. So this was in the British Library.
Okay, yep.
And so, as many people probably like me, we didn't realise that it was actually an English translation. And so I thought, when I found this, crikey, I thought, that would be really useful for everybody else to have. So it was a case of me negotiating with the British Library how we can then make an edition of this to be able to show out to the public. And that's what happened. And so every single page was photographed and then edited to be able to be made into another edition.
Wow. Okay, interesting. That's one of those methods that I never even knew that he wrote a method, I think, when I was growing up. And I certainly have never dug into. I think I have something floating around my iPad that I haven't looked at. But yeah.
There's been the French edition hanging around on IMSLP for quite a while, but nobody realized that all of his text was actually written in English in an English publication.
Wow.
So it's just a sort of a snapshot back into history and how he approached it. It's really interesting. He's very frank with everything he says in there. This is how I like it, but it doesn't matter how you do it.
I've been doing this pandemic has just given me so much extra time that I've been getting really into base research, and I find myself I bought a bunch of books and I've been reading up on the lives and learning a little bit more about Bottazzini, and it's interesting to
it snowballs. You start with one thing and then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Then you go and look up something else and it's like, oh, that's really cool as well. Yeah.
It's so funny because he seemed to, from what I read, he really wanted to make that move into being a composer first. I think, but he was kind of like too good at bass for his own good, and the money came so easily from the bass. It sounds like it's. I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but I think he made a lot of money. I think he was also fairly bad with money, so he was
very
running
generous.
out of money.
Okay,
that's what it is.
He did like a drink as well.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the best of keeping his money to himself, but there's letters of him proving he would send money home to his family, his parents. He's always, any of the interviews you read with him, he was just a very compassionate person, it seems. Whenever he's meeting an interview, he's very kind to them, meets them down. And I think he was very generous with giving his money back to the family and whoever he could support, basically. He didn't want to see people going without, I don't think.
Yeah, it's 300 work. I just think about that. I mean, that's all. He lived a while ago, but not that long ago. No. I mean, we're getting to the era of photography, at least, during his lifetime. And I just think about
it's heartbreaking to know that most of his works aren't played anymore. And that's one of the things. I didn't really expect to find all of this when I started any of this project. I was just interested in the one piece I was working on, and then I found this, and I found that, and then he's got around 13 operas, and then majority of his works are actually vocal work. It's not actually music for the double bass, but he is literally opera obsessed. And literally, when he's not doing opera, writing an opera, he'll be playing opera on the bass. That was just him.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that's true, because you think about how many of his works are fantasies off of opera. I was reading, as I was researching this goofy Bottazzini video I did a couple months ago, I found this Tom Martin, I don't remember if he conducted or he had a hand in was it Bottazzini's Requiem, maybe, if I'm remembering this right, and he was just raving about the piece and how much he loved the piece.
If you listen to it.
Yeah. It's interesting. What a worthy project to get these out and getting Urtext editions. That's how long. I mean, I've done like little projects that can kind of pale in comparison to this, but I'm always astonished at how long the work like you're doing takes.
Yes, and that's where I will want to see the project move into sort of a community type thing where we can all help each other out. Because well, obviously with around 300 works or what have you, then it's almost impossible for one publisher to be able to manage that many. So I want to try and develop the project so other people can help each other. That's my plan for the future. I want other people to try and get help involved, because typing up and digitizing the music is going to take a very long time. And so a community to help the community.
Yeah, well, and we've got ever better tools for doing stuff like that. So obviously, let me know if I can do anything to help and get the word out. It's a major project, but that is the sort of thing that it would be great to have the bass community and people that are
I've been really hoping
that
I could reach out to the ISB to be able to try and get some support behind this project, because ultimately I just want the bass players to have the resource so people can play his music. It's something to be enjoyed and we're supposed to be doing together. That's the whole underlying ambition behind it all.
When do you? I mean, I was curious at how people work on it, because you do many things, and I'm assuming you're probably hanging around the house a little more than you would have thought.
Flat out though, if I'm brutally honest, trying to prepare materials, because probably one of the things you found when you were doing that research project for your Bottazzini video is that how difficult it is to find a lot of information.
You run out of stuff really fast.
But there is actually stuff out there, but it needs to be a group effort to try and get it collated into, and most of it's in Italian. That's the big problem. And that's one of the things I would hope that the community might be able to help with, is to be able to translate materials to help give people more information to be able to study him and his music.
All right, Italian bass students, if you're listening, reach out to Stephen or myself or both of us. And that's what I discovered, and that's what I've discovered looking up, trying to do some research on Von Hall or Sperger or people like that. And there's a lot out there about those people, but my German is pretty rough.
Thank God for Google Translate.
Yeah. Well, I actually did an interview, again, that I haven't put out yet. It's coming soon, with the James Barquette, who did the Alfred Planyavsky, the Baroque double bass violin, or whatever the title is. He did the English translation of that book. And it's a wonderful resource, but I can count on one hand the resources like that are out there. I think I have them all on my bookshelf in English. So it's sort of surprising. And then I even go into the ISB archives and start looking up, and I can find things scattered here or there. That's where I found that Tom Martin Bottazzini Requiem piece. But it'd be great to find a way to get some of this
I'm hoping to try and bring it together so people can access it. That's the whole ambition, is to try and get people being able to access materials to learn.
Beautiful. That's great. I'm shifting gears, but we'll probably come back to this again. What's I have no structure to these at all. Are you all playing in the Bournemouth Symphony now? Are you doing concerts in some capacity, or are you totally
I've not been able to play since the 14th of March. So I'm not actually a permanent member of the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. I freelance for Bournemouth Symphony, Royal Philharmonic and what have you. So I haven't actually had any work since the 14th of March 2020. So things have been very challenging, should I say, and there's not been very much support from the government. But I'm trying to use this time as wisely as I can to try and get projects together, which I hope will benefit others in the future. I'm just trying to use the time wisely.
That is a long chunk of time. Yeah, this is, I was talking to, I also have not played bass since early March. My bass is in the corner there. The last time it left my flat was March 7th or 8th or something like that. I played a bass quartet here in San Francisco. We had this wonderful young bassist named Xavier Foley.
He's a genius.
So we had him out as a guest for this bass bash, and it was that weird time when we weren't sure what was going on, and so they had said no audience, because it was just going to be an audience of kids, and so they said, No kids, but you all can put it on and just play for a camera.
Yeah.
So poor Xavier flew 6 hours across the country to play for my Canon camera, and then we played on Andres Martin bass quartet, and that was the last time. And the other folks in that bass quartet are all freelancers here in the Bay Area, or were, because there's no work now. And yeah, just talking to them about how they're coping, it's rough to not have a contract for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. But as I said, I've tried to just fill my time with other projects that I can.
Yeah, and get outside, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've been for a cycle ride today. I got rained on, funnily enough.
Okay. Fortunately, here in San Francisco, we have a mild climate, so we're in winter, but I'm in a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So, and I tried to get out and check email the beginning of every day on our balcony and just get a little sunshine and try to. It's
got to look after this. You really do, and look after this.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had my ups and downs, just like everybody, and it's funny not funny, tragic, but I was listening to a podcast that launched in like November 2019, and it is a music related podcast, and it was like watching the first scenes of a disaster movie, because they're all talking about their plans for 2020 and all this, and then all of a sudden like March hits and it's like special announcement, and then it all is about
Yeah, I was doing Cabaret the Musical UK tour, and I was stepping in on that, and then literally end of the show, curtain down, go home. That's it, you know, and that was the last thing I did.
Well, I was talking to a bassist here in the States named David White, who does a lot of theater work like that. I saw him here in San Francisco. He was doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and connected with him. He lives in New York City, and theater music is nothing's happening on that front.
And it's a big thing in the UK. I'd argue that musical theatre is one of our bigger employers in the music world, and the fact it just suddenly stopped very abruptly was very difficult to deal with.
Well, and the nature of how this is my impression from here across the pond, but the nature of how people in classical music, jazz, and such in the UK, how they work, it seems to be a little bit more of a freelance nature than maybe how it is in Germany. And because it's interesting, the London classical scene, there are all these different orchestras and people are playing a few different things, but it really seems like people are a higher percentage of working professionals are working as freelancers. Am I right on that?
You're dead correct. I mean, I would say it's even low as 20 or 30% of musicians here have a contract, even less than that maybe. Everybody is freelancing and just trying to do as many different things as possible to be able to make a living. It's quite a challenge, but yes, some people manage it.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software from Steinberg. And one of the features that perplexed me at first, and then I realized its brilliance, is their concept of flows. Here is Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on what flows are and how they work.
The ability to have multiple exercises or multiple songs or whatever, it's so obvious because music is very rarely just one through composed bit from start to end, whether it's a show or a symphony or a sonata or a songbook or whatever. Music's in sections. That's just how it works.
That is how it works, but that's not how most music notation software works. And the ability to break things up like that, oh my goodness. When I'm creating exercises or anything of the sort for my students or any sort of project that I have going, that makes organization so much easier. Exporting is a breeze. Everything that you do in Dorico is beautiful from the get-go, which is really cool coming from other pieces of software. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their site on Steinberg's website. And they have a free product called Dorico SE where you can do practically everything that you can in the full version of Dorico for up to 2 parts. That's more than enough if you're doing bass duets or anything of the like. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. There are so many things to think about when you're practicing. Where do you even begin? Here is Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on what to prioritize in your practicing.
First things first, you got to measure time. Time is of the essence. You want to get the highest return on your time investment. And the way to do that is through listening to yourself and self-recording. Almost everybody who reads the blogs of Rob Knopper, Noah Kagayama, everybody knows self-recording is absolutely essential. So we put it front and center along with time. Recording yourself, measuring the time you've spent on particular sections, and so many other things are available in Modacity. I love this app so much. You can learn more at modacity.co. And if you visit our website, we've got a special offer for lifetime access to the app.
Check it out. You'll love it. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. Yeah, and I mean, we certainly have a large percentage of people doing that here in the States, and you know, our social net is not particularly great here in the United States, and so it's been really interesting might be the wrong word, but seeing how people that do have contracts, how their organizations are taking care of them versus people who play for 5 or 6 different organizations. What's up with them? In general, it's not very good.
The best way to describe the UK musicians are portfolio musicians. That's what they call them. And if I'm honest, majority of musicians in the UK make their money from teaching.
Well, that's fortunately, at least you can kind of sort of teach at the moment. Big shows, you know, not likely to happen for some time. Right. But how I mean, from an outside perspective, it seems like you've been using the year well. If this is what we're seeing, so it's great to hear that you've found a way to channel some energy into some projects that'll, you know, have some sustainability.
I've got a few big dreams. I mean, as soon as I can do in the future, I'd love to do some recordings. I really want to hope that happens in the future. But for now, I'm just going to try and continue producing these editions and what have you, and just trying to get resources out there for bass players to use.
Yeah, a project I do like zero recording really, but the last 3-4 months, I decided we have this sheet music store that we got going, and I'm trying to make videos, and it occurred to me that might be a good way, because like someday I will play bass in public again. I know that will happen. Right now, I have no. Yeah, I have no. There's no. You know, I have no tangible goals with bass. So that's been a good. It's like learn a piece, and my sense of pride means I need to learn it well enough to like not have people make fun of my intonation. So I've tried to at least every couple weeks learn something well enough that I can kind of put it out there in the public, and that has been remarkably good for my development because it's making me listen. And it's like, oh, my vibrato sounds terrible on that, or wow, I really can't play that in tune even after multiple
goals.
takes.
That's what it sounds like. You're chunking information and trying to be able to build things that you can actually manage. Yeah, I totally agree. And in some ways, this situation where we have to record ourselves a lot gives us great sort of a magnifying glass onto things that we don't necessarily hear when we're just doing our normal motions. So in some ways, it can be a real benefit for us, as you're saying, because you can hear things you don't usually pick up.
How are you organizing your days? Since all of a sudden, like normally, if we go back in time, like a year or 16 months or whatever, you probably had gigs and you were running from here and there and commuting and this and that, and then to have a whole bunch of open time. Like how are you setting a work schedule for yourself, or are you
almost?
What are you doing?
I have a very long to-do list that I've been trying to get through. I mean, the thing that was on the top of my list was actually an audition for the BBC, and they said, "Oh, it might happen. It might happen." I kept just keeping on top of them for as long as I could, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen for any time soon. So I've let that go by the wayside. But the projects I've got on my to-do list, I go in cycles, if it makes sense. I'll work. Yeah, I have to have some balance to some other things, but I'll predominantly pick one thing and try and chisel away at that for a couple of weeks. Then I get to a point where if I try and force it, it's not going to work. So then it'll naturally just sit there for a little bit longer, and I'll jump on to the next one. So I was very lucky that when I was at music college, I learnt with Simon Purcell a little bit, and he brought these very useful tools into approaching improvisation that actually sort of apply to life. And so I've been sort of in the back of my mind using that as a template to be able to work on. And it's balancing what attracts you to something and then versus something that really needs to be done. And then you just keep going on cycles between the two sort of types of things.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting. I think I work in kind of a similar way. I have on my desktop like 4 kind of longer term projects, and they get done when they get done.
That's right.
And then I have things that they must be done this week. Like I have to get this report in, or I have a weird professional life, so I have like 12 irons in the fire on different projects. But yeah, I work in a similar kind of way. It sounds like.
Yeah, the amount of content and the amount of stuff that you've managed to bring together in 2 years is phenomenal. I mean, it is massively impressive. So your methods must be working really, really brilliantly, I have to say.
Well, I think the main thing that I try to do, because I've gone through different phases in my life where I've had a full-time job and then where I've been just freelancing, and actually since moving to San Francisco 5 years ago, I've kind of been the boss of my own time. I was doing some freelancing, and then I realized, oh wait, I don't want to enter this freelance life again. It's like the same go around that I was having in Chicago.
It's just very insecure generally, I've found, particularly earnings-wise.
Right. Well, I'm particularly glad now that this pandemic happened that I didn't go down that road, because I I wanted to be home more, be able to have dinner with the wife and such. And so I just decided I was going to work from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, just like a normal office worker, and do whatever the heck it is I do during that time. And that's kind of what that's been helpful for me, because I'm looking at that clock and it's getting closer and closer to 5, and it's like, I got to stop. And so I think knowing that I have that constraint on myself has been helpful. And I used to not work that way. I used to like wake up at 4 a.m. and blog before going to work, or I would be editing stuff at 9 p.m. and I just had no boundaries. And I think those boundaries have helped me.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. There's a few books that I've loved to read. The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. That's an amazing book. And those sort of things talk about having tangible. Also, Kenny Werner's Effortless Mastery. That's another great book to read. And as you say, it's also giving yourself a self-respect thing. It's like, I am actually doing something that is going to benefit others. It's going to work. I'm going to make sure I'm working like other people are, 9 to 5, if you like, or have you. And that, I think, motivates you as well, because you're giving yourself enough self-respect to be able to carry on with your projects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And that Kenny Werner, Effortless Mastery, what a great book. I actually just heard him on a podcast. I believe it was Mind Over Finger, my friend Rene Paul Gauthier. And it was cool because I don't think I've heard it. I don't know if he's done many podcasts, or I don't think I've heard him. I don't know if he puts himself out there like that, but it's one of those books that I've known about for forever. And it was just really cool to hear from him.
Yeah, well, because the freelance and a musician's life in general is very demanding, especially when you're on stage and what have you, and it gives you very good structure to your mindset, if you like, or methods to be able to cope with difficult situations. It's a very, very important book. I think musicians should really. It's very like cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, and a good mixture of the two is great.
Yeah. It's I've struggled throughout my life when I've been in more of that freelance work phase of my life with kind of like not taking myself seriously enough or respecting myself. And when I've had a full-time job, or when I've been connected with an organization, I'm a very much of I like being part of a team. And so one of the challenges with freelance for me was that I wasn't really part of a team. And then I just kind of, musician is not really, people don't, you say doctor, you say lawyer here in the States, you say musician, that's not in the same ballpark.
I know exactly what you're saying. And sort of, those other jobs give ratification for what you do from externally, or if you're employed by someone, you're ratified. And that's quite a difficult thing I think we all have to challenge or deal with if we're freelancing, is to be able to have that, I am doing something that's worthwhile,
Yeah. Well, I had 7 years where I went and taught public school here in the States, and it was actually kind of fun to just say, because before someone would ask me what I do. Not that people are asking me what I do all the time, but like trying to explain music. Back when I was living in Chicago, what do you do? I'm a musician. Oh, what do you play? Bass. Oh, you play in the Chicago Symphony? No, I don't. Why don't you?
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't work that way. And then you have a lengthy so do you make money doing that? And it was so nice to just say, I teach high school, and everybody understands that. They said, I went to high school, I had teachers, I know exactly what you do. Nice to meet you too. And then to have like a steady paycheck, and all of a sudden I could get a car loan. I could before here in the United States having to explain my income. You have this very suspicious looking income streams to any institution. So getting a house, getting a loan, get all that stuff.
All those things are very much dreams for me, if I'm honest. I hate to say it, but yes, for those very reasons, yeah.
Well, it'll be really cool to see how what you're doing on the publishing front evolves, and like what that looks like, because it's you probably don't know what this is going to look like. It'll be interesting to go to 5 years from now, look back to right now, beginning of 2021, and if you keep that work ethic up and you keep putting things out and getting these projects together, some of the greatest things in life, at least in my life, have been really long-term projects. Like I sowed the seeds. Is that the right term?
Yeah,
like
right.
10 years ago, now they're happening. And so it's...
Yeah, I agree. It's the same. I've always tried to, the motto I've always had to be employable as possible, if that makes sense. And I've always tried to see this coming in the future. So I thought that, right, I could do a bit of publishing, a bit of teaching, a bit of freelance playing, a bit of this, that, and trying to have my income as multiple different sources. It's a lot more challenging than we ever thought it would be. But I just hope that these areas grow and they can help,
Well, and the thing that I sort of, that's a little bit of comfort to me, if we look at any other pandemic in history, generally there is a flourishing of the arts, and people, like, I would not buy stock in Zoom right now. People are probably getting sick of hearing me say this on the podcast. Yeah, because the moment we don't have to do this, we're not going to, and I used to do a lot of remote interviews, and it's a great way for us to connect like this. It's so convenient, but I had been going in the direction of never doing remote interviews and only doing in person. And so what I'd started to do was go on trips. And so I went 2 weeks in Australia and just talked to Australians. I went to New York City, and I thought, and I will again once we get going again, but I thought 1 week a year, I'm just going to go to New York City, because I could go to New York City, I could go to talk to somebody different every day, every hour of every day, and never run out of people.
Everybody you meet knows something you don't. So that's my motto. Meet as many people as you can, and you have as rich life as possible.
Yeah, but I mean, I know that as soon as we can, I'm going to be going. I'm a concert goer. I like going and seeing concerts, but I am going to every concert there is. And I think as soon as we get out of this, because I am so sick of sitting at home.
Yeah, because everything you do has to go through the computer, if it makes sense, and so that can get a bit much. So I completely sympathise. I want to obviously be back to playing, back to seeing concerts, back to just being with other people and being creative with other people in the room. I mean, it'd be delight, absolutely. If you came over, I'd love to come. We can go for a beer. That'd be great.
Well, I 100% will be in the UK. Like that was one of those places that I felt I just had this traveling schedule that was impossible last year, where I had to be at a conference here in the States, and then I had another one. I had just enough time to fly to Leeds and come back, and because otherwise, and it's a long enough flight, like from the West Coast, where back in I used to live in Chicago, which is closer to the East Coast. London's not bad. That's not a bad flight, really, but you add the 5 or 6 hours it takes to get across this stinking country, and it's not direct, so it's like fly to the East Coast, then fly again, and I think I flew San Francisco, Philadelphia, then Ireland, and then
crikey.
Leeds or something. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. I've never had the chance to come to America, though, so I really look forward to that one day. I know there's a wealth of...
Well, I'd love to see you out here, but if you got to pick a place with your interest, you got to go to New York City, because it's the only, as someone who's into jazz, I mean, it really is. It's like watching it's like something out of a movie. I mean, it really, like the East Village and walking around. It's the only 24-hour town we've got here in this country. Like there was an International Society of Bassist convention 4 years ago, I think was the one. It was in upstate New York, and I had a layover. I got to just outside of Manhattan, the airport, and at like 10 p.m. and my next flight was 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or something. So I just threw my backpack on, hopped in an Uber, and I just wandered Manhattan all night. I was eating Korean food at 2 in the morning, and I was seeing music. And I mean, this town I live in here, it's a big city, but it shuts down by 11 p.m. There's almost nothing.
I'd say London has a similar vibe to that, if I'm honest. You can still get your Korean food at 2 a.m. in the morning, don't worry. There's lots of kebab shops as well. So I look forward to doing the same.
Yeah. Let me know what I can do to help and get the word out about this or anything. I'm always available.
That'll be great. Yeah, I've wanted to have a chance to speak to you for a very long time. So anything we can do in collaboration with the ISB, it'd be great to be able to approach some institutions as well that may want to be able to help us with access to manuscripts and what have you. That would be fantastic. Yeah. For sure. Well, we'll start with getting this podcast out, and I'll obviously link up to your site and the editions and all that kind of good stuff. So I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great. It's great to meet you. Let's chat again. I love doing a round 2 and a round 3 with people, and in person with a coffee or a beer, even better. Yeah, that's right. Although I have got alcohol, but it'd be great. Stephen, thank you so much. StephenStreet.com is the website. Check it out. He's got a great website, by the way. And these publications are there. And like I mentioned in the intro, we've got some of his publications coming into our Double Bass Block ecosystem. But whether you go to his website and get it directly from him or through us or whatever, he's doing good work. Super cool person, and the first of many conversations, I'm sure. And by the way, I have this awesome Bottazzini coffee mug that Stephen sent me, and you can get that on the website too, I believe. I'm clicking around here.
And that is very fun to, Bottazine merchandise. There it is right on the website. You can get heavyweight t-shirts, you can get hoodies, you can get Bottazine poster. This mug is pretty sweet. Got a couple designs for that. So very cool. I gotta remember to use that in one of my upcoming videos. I've got it sitting there. I use it, and I usually don't drink coffee while I'm shooting my videos, but I've got I do, but not on camera. So I gotta make that happen sometime soon. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Leon. Thank you for listening. If you ever want to suggest a guest or just reach out and say hi, feedback@contrabaseconversations.com will get you in touch with me. I respond to each and every message, even if it takes me a few days to get back to folks. And this podcast is, this might be the longest thing I've done. No, it's not quite. I'm closing in on this being the longest activity I've done continuously in my life. I think that playing in the Elgin Symphony still holds that record. I think I've done that. I did that for 16 seasons. And this podcast is 14 years or something like that. So it will surpass Elgin unless I quit doing the podcast. But it's been interesting having this as a through line for before going back to school to be an orchestra teacher, while I was an orchestra teacher, and I kind of let this podcast lapse, trying to figure out what the heck to do with my life when I found out we were moving out to California, resurrecting this kind of podcast 2.0, almost another podcast really than the first one back in 2015, focusing on this, getting busy with other projects, building a team, which has been awesome. And it's a crazy journey. This sheet music store, I will bet I have slightly more time for these outros than I usually do. I'm doing them on a Thursday, and I seem to have been right down to the wire the last few weeks. So I'll share a little bit more about my life. The sheet music store that we put out a couple months ago at this point, 3 months ago, has been surpassing my expectations. And nobody is making a full-time living off this sheet music store, nor do I anticipate people will be at any point soon, any of the composers or certainly me or Trevor working on the background on this. But boy, it is really cool to see people connecting with this and picking up titles. And it's something, I mean, I guess I wasn't expecting it not to work, but it's exceeded my expectations, and it's just another aspect of the bass community that we have built here. Especially those of you who've been on this journey for a while, it's really cool, and it's cool to see that manifest itself as something that is actually benefiting people in the bass community, and actually it's benefiting the people who purchase the music, and obviously benefiting the composers. So thank you, Trevor Jones. Thank you, boy, that was an idea that got started by Michael Kurth in the Atlanta Symphony. He suggested this sheet music store, really just a resource what eventually became a sheet music store. And we had it all. It was just this free library, and then realized as more and more titles started to get added that there's some potential here to actually turn it into a financial thing. So anyway, that's been cool. If you haven't checked it out, you can go to doublebassblog.org/music. And that will take you there. And as I record this, we're at over 125 titles. And we've got like a big old bunch of other titles from some fairly well-known people in the bass world coming on board soon. So I think it's pretty cool, and not my idea at all, but it's just one of the cool things about the community aspect of all this and having people involved. Yes. Okay. No edits on this one, Jason. So let's get out of here and thank the team who put these together. Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Kilgore, Texas, just a little bit east of DFW. Check him out at mitchmooring.com. Award-winning basses. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.